So I have this 1990 F935. Before I dispose of it in some manner, I figured this would be a really good opportunity to do a comparison of the Deere offerings for front mount mowers. Front mount mowers really offered by Deere have been offered since the early 80s, starting off with the F910, which is an Onan powered unit. Basically use the same differential and transaxle transmission setup as the 318s and the 420s and the 430s. In fact, the axles on this F935 are the same as the axles on the 420 and 430. So the differential is a little bit different because it's not a 2-speed. Whereas, and they produced these front mount units up until 2000, at which point they made a gigantic leap forward into the or not F, these would just be like the 1445, 1420s, 1435s. And the 1545s and the 1565s would be the front mounts that look a lot like that. Front mounts offer, they offer you a lot of grass cutting capability. In other words, you can cover a lot of acres per hour. The maintenance cost is, while the maintenance cost may seem high on the surface, what I found is maintenance cost per acre is actually extremely low. Because just basically replaceable components, and I'll go through some of that if we have the daylight to do it. But what I wanted to do to compare these is if you're looking for a wide area mower, or not necessarily a wide area, but a large area mower, acreage mower. So I mow 7.5 acres. And you're not necessarily a huge fan of zero turns. I am not a huge fan of zero turns. But the front mounts seem to offer a really nice compromise between a garden tractor and a zero turn. Biggest compromise is you can get front attachments for these front mount mowers aside from just the mower deck, brooms, blowers, stuff like that, where you can't get those on zero turns. But the biggest difference between these two machines is cost. You're going to pay for an F935 right now. You're going to pay somewhere between $2,000 and $4,000 depending on condition. Most of the time, obviously, there's going to be deals and et cetera, et cetera. Meanwhile, if you're shopping for a 1445, you're probably, when I bought that one in 2016. For it and a 47 blower attached to it with 2,000 hours on it, I paid $13,000 for it. Now, keep in mind that these machines new are with a mower deck are probably close to $40,000 or $45,000. I have not priced them recently, and I think these older machines, if you inflation adjustment is made, I think they were over $40,000 brand new. So there's a significant investment. So it's not necessarily there's very, very few individuals that are actually going to go out and buy one brand new to take care of their yard. It's just not really cost effective, of course, unless you have money to burn, I guess. Then you could do it. And there are individuals out there that do that. I would love to go buy a new, like a 1575 with an air-conditioned cab and everything. I think that would be really, really nice, but I can't justify. Even on the used market, a 1575 with 1,000 hours on it's going to be $30,000. So, but back to this comparison right here before I get on too much of a tangent. This F935 right here, 22 horsepower, Yanmar 3TNA 72UJ engine, really, really solid engine platform. And it's got the Sunstrand 15U pump, and it's got the Peerless differential and axle. Really, really a bomb-proof setup. About the biggest problem that you have with these machines are the front axles will tend to break, and the long PTO shaft from the back of the engine going up front has a tendency to wear out, as does some of the drivetrain going from the PTO connection on the tractor to the deck. They just seem to wear out over time. Other than that, really good heavy-duty units are capable of mowing a couple acres an hour at minimum. I think I've never actually mowed much with an F935, but my experience with the F935 is actually what got me interested in a 1445 when we bought this place in 2016. I really kind of liked the front mount aspect of it. I used a F935. A friend and I bought a couple 935 units and really enjoyed operating them. But I mean, I had a 1/4 acre at the time, and a 72-inch deck on a 1/4 acre is just not, it's not feasible. So, basically, kind of one of the things that I want to do is I want to compare these two, now that I've gone over cost and some of the benefits of jumping forward or jumping back. If you jump forward into a 1445, you're going to get a 31 or 32 horsepower, 31 horsepower Yanmar diesel engine. You're going to get a tough torque transaxle. I would say a design life on these machines is about 5,000 hours. That's just based on the marketing information I have. I would say that the transaxle is probably going to be your limiting effect, or your limiting item here, and it's probably a 5,000 hour transaxle. So I've got about 2,500 hours on this 1445, and so basically I know it's about half its lifespan. One of the perks of going to a 1445 is the fact that the deck, this 7-iron deck, is far superior to this 72-inch deck, which there's nothing I would say bad about this 72-inch deck, but this 72-inch deck, the 7-iron deck, is just probably, it's beefier. It has the blades have a higher tip speed. I don't know what those are, but just based on sound and speed and everything else I know about these units, I can tell you that this deck just cuts better. That's not to say that you can't cover a significant amount of acres with this deck right here, but with 31 horsepower, this is actually kind of the mid-pack in terms of horsepower. They offered several other machines at the same time. They offered a 1420, which is the 28 horsepower gas powered machine. And then they offered a 1435, which is 24 horsepower Yanmar diesel powered. The 1445, which is Yanmar diesel powered. They offered a 1545, which is a 2-speed transaxle, and 4-wheel drive. This one is, the 1445 is 4-wheel drive as well, and I'll get into that in just a second. And then they offered a 1565, which is 38 horsepower Yanmar diesel. And that one you could actually get with a Lastech or Lastek, I don't know how you say it, 110-inch deck. That was aftermarket. I don't think Deere offers that anymore, but I think you can buy those decks new from Lastech, however you want to say it. So, 72-inch deck for this machine is not a problem. This machine will power a 60-inch snowblower, which is over here, right there. That 60-inch snowblower, it will run it just fine. You can get a 47-inch blower for this machine right here. You can get brooms for both of them. And I think the biggest limiting factor on this F935 compared to the 1445 is lack of horsepower. I mean, you're 9 horsepower short on the F935, so you're 9 horsepower short power in that deck. And even though that I've had a 1535 before with 24 horsepower, a 72-inch deck was all that 24 horsepower engine wanted, and I would say that this 72-inch deck is pretty much a little bit more than the 22 horsepower can handle, based on my experience. But overall, I mean, these are really solid platforms. Don't discount higher hours. In the introduction video to this machine has almost 4,700 hours on it, and it's still, it starts right up like no problem. See here if we can go ahead and start it up. Now it is warm, so obviously, but even if it's cold, I left it set out the other night and it did perfectly fine. We'll go ahead and throttle it up. And so realistically, and I don't know if any work has been done to this engine or not, but these Yanmar diesels are, I would say, close to indestructible. I've pulled apart one of the machines that I bought way back in 2015. had a broken front axle, and so we went ahead and just tore the whole machine down. And I was absolutely shocked. Most of the parts in that diesel engine were within wear spec. A couple were within new spec, and that machine had over 4,500 hours on it. So if they're taken care of, there's no reason that the hours should scare you on one of these machines. And it all comes down to your inspection. You know, if you go somewhere to buy one of these, you want to make sure, one of the things that will always be worn out is the caster wheels. And so sometimes the caster wheels are worn out. I can go ahead and tell you. And basically it's just this pole right there doesn't get greased. And so it wears out over time. You want to inspect the drive line, make sure that the drive shaft to the deck is not too wobbly, and this one is not. You know, make sure this deck is a little noisy. The bearings probably need to be replaced, but nice thing is the bearings are actually reasonably easy to replace on this deck. It does take a little bit larger tools to do it, and the deck is extremely heavy to get off the tractor. But overall, you know, it's not a bad experience to replace bearings. And then the nice thing is all the driveline components are readily available on eBay or used mower salvage yard, stuff like that. I mean, Deere made a lot of these machines, and a lot of them have gone to parts. And, you know, you can find good used parts on lots of these machines. Same thing with the engine. I mean, you think about the number of engines that are out there. As I've said, this is a 310A 72UJ, and this engine was in the 420. Granted, it's a little bit different configuration because it's only 20 or 430. Sorry, not 420. 430. It was in the 430. It's in the 455, which the 455 should just be a drop-in. Basically, I think you could take an engine out of a 455 and change the exhaust and the intake arrangement. I think you just need to change the exhaust. And my guess is you would have an engine that you could just drop right in here without any effort at all. You know, just a matter of getting the wiring right. And so, you know, it's one of those deals that parts are readily available for these F series, and you know, their cost of ownership is not necessarily high. I mean, if you can find a decent F935 unit for say $3,000, and say you have to put $500 into it every year, which some of you may think that's absolutely crazy, but say you have to put on average $500 into it every year, and you mow 2 acres once a week, so that's 8 acres a month, and you're going to mow for 6 months a year, so that's 48 acres. Say we'll just call it 50 acres that you're going to mow a year. You're paying basically $10 per acre in parts and maintenance, you know, and plus the cost of the machine. And that's really not that bad. I mean, $10 per acre for a low cost option. I mean, that's if you spend $500 a year. Some years you might not even spend that. I can tell you on average, I have spent on this 1445 here, on average, I spend somewhere between $300 and $400 on average a year in parts and maintenance. You know, just last year I had to replace a tire. I've had to replace some deck components. I had to buy a spindle one year. I've had to replace the tires, you know, things along those lines. I mean, all those costs add up, and that's why I say $500 a year. And for the reason I say $500 on an older machine is more things are going to be worn out. So, you know, you're going to have to replace other things, but $10 an acre to mow doesn't, I mean, it seems high on the surface, but say you go out and you buy, I mean, think about the speed that you're going to mow. It's going to take you an hour to mow those 10 acres or those 2 acres every, so you're basically, you're costing yourself whatever you're out. I mean, you can do all this math in your head. I've lost where I was going with that in terms of numbers. But if it takes you an hour to mow the 2 acres, which I think the F935 is very, very capable of mowing 2 acres in an hour, you know, simple math tells you, and it's costing you $10 an acre, so it's $20 every time you go mow, and I'm including fuel in that. So it's going to probably burn in that hour, you're going to burn about a gallon of diesel fuel, you know, just pretty low cost overall. When you start looking at the actual cost of mowing, every year. And so, but now let's get on to this 1140 or 1445, because the 1445 is a whole different beast. Mainly because it's got a little bit more horsepower. It powers a 72-inch deck a little bit better, or actually a whole lot better. It's a little bit more comfortable. I can tell you one of my complaints so far with the F935 is the comfort. But this 1445 is really just kind of the next step, but it's also 2, 3, 4 times more expensive depending on, you know, what you're after than the F935 would be. You know, a really nice, say, 1565 with air conditioning and everything else that was offered, let's say a 2010 or 2008 or something like that, you're probably still going to pay close to $20,000 for a low hour 1565 with a 72-inch deck on it. So, you know, you can easily, you know, double, triple, or quadruple your budget if you're looking at a front, like something like this. However, benefit is your cost per acre is probably going to be a little bit lower because there's going to be fewer components that are worn out, and your components are a little bit more readily available, and they're probably a little bit cheaper if you're buying them new or you're buying them lightly used. For instance, I bought an entire second deck, a 60-inch deck for this unit right here for $1,000. Now that covers, basically there's lots of components on that 60-inch deck that I can use on this deck if they go bad, and that's going to reduce my cost. And so, you know, you have to recognize that your cost per acre, basically in fuel cost, what did I calculate one time? Basically my cost per hour, well, I would really have to, if I said something about along those lines, I would probably be lying. So I did it all first couple years I owned this machine. Basically I burn 1.25 to 1.3 gallons per hour running the 31 horsepower diesel mowing. And then like I said, I average between $350 and $400 a year. I mow 7 acres. Normally, if it was a normal year, I mow 7 acres once per week for about 20 some odd weeks a year. So, I mean, you're looking at 140 acres. Did I do all that math right? Give or take. Well, I mean, you're probably closer to 6 months. So probably 26 weeks. So maybe closer to 200 acres a year that I'm running on this machine. That 200 acres, and then, you know, I've got $350 to $400 in expenses every year. You know, that's, I mean, it's really not all that bad, acres wise. I mean, you would have to do all that math. I can't deal with that math in my head, particularly this late in the evening. My brain is pretty much shot. But the real perk of the non-F series is the fact that you can get them in 4-wheel drive. The 4-wheel drive just makes this machine like a little mountain goat. It will mow the ditch. It will mow hills. It will pretty much do anything I ask of it. In fact, I have mowed on hills steep enough that I have almost flipped this machine before, and I felt comfortable up until the point it started to tip. When I say almost flipped it, I'm talking the only thing supporting it was the fact that I was mowing with that side facing down. So that side was the downhill side, and the only thing keeping this machine up was the fact that I started to head downhill. And when I did so, because I knew something was wrong, when it started tipping, this back wheel was up. This wheel was partially off the ground. That side was all the way tilted over. And the only thing that kept me from going over was the fact that that deck sticks out on the far side of the tractor. And I actually had to crawl out of this side of the cab and literally I just stood on the rear axle, crawled back into the cab, and drove it off the hill. So that was my naivety, I guess you would say, in operating these, and, you know, not necessarily my brightest moment, but it shows you what the machine is capable of. You know, the fact that I did not feel uncomfortable sitting in the seat. Now, keep in mind that I have not mowed that particular place again, and I think some of it was probably due to my speed. I was probably going a little fast, and the bumps probably contributed some to that. But I mean, I unfortunately don't have a video of it, or I would actually put it up on the channel, because I think it's important for people to learn from experiences like that. So, you know, when you have a choice between these two machines, really, you know, kind of think it out. I would say both of them are great grass cutters. I would thoroughly endorse both to be used on a larger property. I don't think I would talk myself into it if you had less than, say, an acre and a half. I think you'd be hard justified doing it in less than an acre and a half. So if you have questions, comments, I know this is almost a 20-minute video now. If you have questions, comments, leave them below. I'll be happy to answer my experience based on these machines. But don't discount front mounts. I'm really happy that I went the front mount route instead of the zero turn. These are very capable machines in the winter. And we can get into a whole discussion on capable machines in winter, but you can look up some of the videos I have of this 1445. I used to have a blade for it, and I still have the snowblower, and it is very, very capable of moving snow. And so is the F935. It just doesn't have a cab. So, and I don't have a blower for it. So anyway, thanks for watching. Leave your questions, comments below, and I'll get back to you. Thank you.